attendees all hear us, so are they muted? Just so I understand how this works. Still from the old days.
They are all muted, sir.
Okay, but they can hear us. Okay. So good morning, everyone. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for logging in and joining us for this interactive session with the Nigeria Electricity Regulatory Commission, as well as other panelists from EcoDisco and some luminaries from the electricity sector in Nigeria. Just to set the tone for the morning, we're going to have a presentation by NERC, after which we will have some remarks from EcoDisco, and then following which we'll have an interactive session where we'll have questions from participants, as well as a few questions that we had sent in beforehand, which will give the NERC representative and the EcoDisco representative opportunities to respond to and enlighten us on the situation on the sector, especially with regard to the tariff regime, which is what occasioned this seminar this morning, this panel this morning. So without further ado, let me hand over to the chairman, LCI Power Sector Group, Mr. Akin Odeyemi. Good morning, sir.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, and good morning to you all. And welcome to this interactive session with the Nigerian Electricity Regulatory Commission on the new tariff. And I'm sure we'll also be discussing some other issues on private infrastructure and things relating to power. So I also like to use this opportunity to welcome the representative of the chairman of the Nigeria Electricity Regulatory Commission. So we have here Mr. Shafuddin Mahmood, who is also the General Manager, Head of Marketing, Competition and Race Division of NEC. Welcome, sir.
Thank you so much, sir. A pleasure to be with you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And also like to welcome Mr. George Etomi, who is the principal partner of George Etomi and Partners, a reputable law firm, and he also happens to be director of the Eco Electricity Distribution Company. Welcome, sir.
My pleasure.
Also, I'd like to acknowledge the Vice Chairman of the Power Sector Group, Otumba Akimbo Akiolubade. Welcome. And Secretary of the group, Mr. Henry. Henry, welcome, and also thank you for putting this together. So without further ado, at least we'll move on to the activity of today. As we all know, power is a very key sector in the economy of Nigeria and anywhere in the world. Power is very important. And when we are looking at SMEs, in which a lot of us belong to, we need power to make that thrive. Because in any economy around the world, the SMEs drive the economy. Because in as much as you have a lot of government spending here and there, but you rely on the small and medium enterprise, also with the large corporates, the private sector, to drive the economy. And for you to drive the economy, the power sector must be right. And you know, for a very long time, the power sector in Nigeria has not been where it should be. Even though it has been privatized and everyone is expected that things should have improved more than what it is today, but that's not the case. So it has been one issue to the other, and that has really affected the growth of so many companies. You've seen the overheads of a lot of companies have shot up just because of generating power themselves, buying diesel, then your generator, servicing and doing all that has made the overheads. So a lot of companies are not as profitable as they should be. And even some companies, because of that, have collapsed. So we're looking at ways in which the sector can be improved. I know there have been so many discussions around this over years, but well, everyone is still hopeful that something can be done. So with this, we're hoping that we can still all come together and profile solutions to make things work better. So that's why I'm very delighted today that we have the representative of the chairman of NEC, and we have a director of the Eco Disco. At least they'll be able to shed more light into things that are going on, because definitely they will have some more information that we do have. So thank you for coming, and thank you, the audience, everybody here. Thank you for participating, coming here to participate here this morning, taking time out. So I welcome you all the participants for coming here. So thank you, and we are all expecting to have a very nice discussion this morning, very fruitful discussion. So thank you all. Thank you.
Can you repeat that one time?
Yeah.
So I have a bad internet connection. Can you repeat that, please?
Sorry?
Can you go over that one more time? Can you repeat the last? My internet is a bit unstable.
Oh, no. I've rounded up, so we can move to the presentation.
Okay. So everyone, we're now moving to the presentation stage, and we'll now have the presentation by Mr. Mahmoud Shafuddin from NERC. Floor over to you, sir.
Thank you so much, and very good morning to all of us, all the participants. It is indeed a pleasure to be with you this morning. It's also an honor for us to be at this gathering. Just like the chairman mentioned, power indeed is key to the success of any economy. And we at NEC have never underestimated the responsibility reposed on us. We know if we are able to succeed in turning around this sector, virtually the whole economy of this country will also be turned around. So indeed, we know we have a very big responsibility, and we know it is also an opportunity for us to write our name in gold if we are able to make the impact that we all believe we should be able to. So we once again thank you for the opportunity to be here, and also apologize for the inability of the chair to be here. I did explain earlier when you sent in the request that the chairman unfortunately will not be able to attend. Wednesday is usually days set aside for our executive management meeting, that's the commission, and the Wednesday of the last month is also a day we set aside for what we call expanded management meeting, where the commission meets with senior management. So I will be making a presentation on behalf of the commission. Of course, all the content in there represents the commission. But of course, after that, discussions that we will have are things that will come from me as an individual. Of course, as a representative of the commission, but not as the chair. but what I'm presenting represents an opinion of the Commission. So let me start by sharing my screen. Henry? Hello, Henry, are you with me?
Yes, I'm with you, sir.
Okay, Henry, can you help me start sharing the document if you have it on your system?
All right.
It's like I'm having a challenge. Okay. Apology for that, please.
Can you see it now, sir?
Yes, I can see it. I think let's start with the content. That's slide number 2. Okay, just to take you through what I intend to discuss, we start with the role of the regulator in tariff setting, the tariff setting methodology, the multi-tier tariff methodology, that's the popular MITRE, the building blocks to the MITRE, and of course, how we set tariffs for discourse. Then the popular, or what has now become the popular service-based tariff. So the preamble to it. And I will take you through what we did before introducing the SBT. Some of the things we did, or which the government did, the federal government did, include the power sector recovery program, the performance improvement plan initiated by the commission, then the order on cost reflective, transition to cost reflective tariffs, the service level agreements, which the discourse and TCN were directed to sign, and then of course the service-based tariff. So we discussed at length on that. And lastly, the December 2020 minor review of MITRE 2020, which set in the current tariff. So we can go to the next slide. The regulator, what is the role of the regulator in tariff setting? The regulator is an independent government agency that was established by the Act of the National Assembly. And we have both legislative and quasi-judicial powers. And there are also clear objectives enshrined in Section 32, subsection 1 of the Act as to what the regulator should do. These objectives, I can quote some. The first is to create, promote, and preserve efficient industry and market structures, and to ensure the optimal utilization of resources for the provision of electricity services. Then, secondly, to ensure that prices, I highlighted some of these keywords because they are very important in the discussions we are going to have. Ensure that prices charged by licensees are fair to consumers and are sufficient to allow licensees to finance their activities and to allow for reasonable earnings for efficient operation. So the keywords highlighted here actually have to do with sustainability. Because when we say something should be sufficient, it means something that should be able to allow you to continue to exist. So in a regulated business, it means you must be able to generate enough money to continue with your activities, and you also must be able to have an incentive to continue to be in business, which is the earnings, the profit you will make. But since it is regulated, we said it has to be reasonable, and it also must ensure efficient operation. Another objective is to ensure that there is an adequate supply of electricity to consumers. And of course, we must ensure that the regulation is fair and balanced for all the stakeholders. That's for licensees, for the consumers, for the investors, and all other stakeholders. So it isn't an easy task. It requires balancing. Of course, this is not a business that is aimed at making someone happy or all stakeholders happy. While some may be happy with one decision, of course, others may not be happy with it. So since we are talking about Fridays or tariff, how are these tariffs determined? How do we determine tariff? The next slide has to do with the tariff determination, which the Act clearly also states. We are supposed to regulate potentially competitive segments, that's generation and trading, and also the natural monopoly segments, that is transmission, distribution, and system operation. So the Act also provides that Section 76.2 mandate the Commission to adopt methodology for the tariff determination. It isn't that we just come out with a tariff methodology on our own, but we have to come out with it based on certain clear guidance, which is what has been provided in slide 5 of this presentation. We should make sure that this methodology that we come out with allow licensee that operates efficiently to recover their full cost, including a reasonable return on the capital invested in the business. You are all business people. No person will invest in a money-losing venture. If we want to attract investment, if we want sustainable investment, then we must make provision for the investor to recover his money and also make a profit, a reasonable profit that will incentivize him to continue in business. So we also must ensure that this methodology provides incentives for continued improvement of technical and economic efficiency with which the services are provided. We also must give consumers economically efficient signals regarding the cost of their consumption as imposed by the licensee. We should also avoid undue discrimination among consumers and between consumer categories. These are all what the Act says we should look into in coming out with a tariff methodology. We should also phase out or substantially reduce cross subsidies. This is something I know which is a big issue to manufacturers and of course businessmen in generally, as for long they have been made to bear the burden of others through cross subsidy. So the Commission adopted a methodology which we call the multi-tier tariff methodology. And we came out with an order establishing that. So the MITO, as the acronym, that's the acronym we use, has certain building blocks. And these building blocks consist of generation building blocks, the transmission tariff building blocks, and the distribution and retail tariff building blocks, which has been provided in slide 6. Henry. Sorry, I think there is a slight discrepancy with what I have. Okay, the multi-tariff methodology. The MITO provides a stable price path. Okay, that's the building blocks. Yeah. So let's stop at this, the methodology first. Let's go back to the methodology, please. The might provide a stable price path and sets out the basis and pricing principles and procedures for effecting tariff reviews. The methodology provides for the following reviews. We have minor reviews, which are done usually every 6 months. And these are done to consider for changes in inflation, exchange rate, fuel cost, and of course, available generation capacity. A number of stakeholders have expressed reservations on the time period for these minor reviews. Some are of the opinion that it should now be done on an annual basis. Some are even saying it should be done on a monthly basis. In 2017, precisely, the commission undertook a consultation process on whether it should increase the time period for the minor reviews or even reduce it to once a year. But the overall result or virtually the opinion expressed during that consultation process was that we should maintain the annual minor reviews. Mainly, businesses expressed reservation having monthly changes. They said that is something that will impact negatively on their activities. So the committee maintained the 6 months or biannual reviews. Every 5 years, we are also expected to do major reviews, which consider all the inputs and cost assumptions, including efficient operation and capital expenditure, and of course, the return on investment. There is also a provision for extraordinary tariff review, which are outside the mentioned two. These are done at the instance of the licensees, based on either revenue requirement issue, tariff design, or cost of generation. So let us now look at the micro building blocks. We all know that this industry is a chain consisting of generation, transmission, and distribution. So it is the overall cost of these three, plus, of course, the value-added tax of 7.5% that adds to make up the retail tariff that all pay, either as residential, commercial, or industrial consumers. So how do we set tariffs for the discourse? Because for most consumers, all what they know is a disco, because it is the disco that virtually supplies to the end user customer, and it is the disco that bills, it is the disco that collects money. So the next slide has to do with the tariff setting for discos. So the micro tariff trajectory is set over a period of 5 years as stated. And of course, we have biannual minor reviews to adjust for changes in inflation, exchange rate, fuel cost, and available generation capacity. And we all know that at the point of privatization, all the discos have signed performance agreements with the Bureau of Public Enterprises. This performance agreement provides for ATC and C loss levels, thus aggregate technical collection and commercial losses over a period of 5 years. So they are supposed to reduce these losses over a period of 5 years. But in the course of the Henry, it's like you have stopped sharing the screen.
I think there's a minor technical difficulty.
Okay, can I continue with that?
Okay, go on, sir. I'm back now.
Okay, so I was talking about the agreement, the performance agreement, the discourse signed with the Bureau of public enterprises, and the agreement provides for reduction of aggregate technical, commercial, and collection losses over a period of 5 years. We all know that these agreements were signed in November, end of 2013, October to be precise. But so far, 3 years have now been discounted from that 5 years. 2 based on agreement as mutual non-performance years, because there are years when the government was unable to provide cost-reflective tariffs. And of course, the first year was accepted as a grace period for the discourse to undertake loss studies. We also looked at, in determining the tariffs for discourse at the CAPEX and OPEX, these are also set by the performance agreements. Of course, there are provisions for adjustments for forex and inflation. So we had a minor, the last minor review we had before the recent one of December 2020 was that of 2016 to 2018, which was approved by the Commission in 2019. So in 2020, September to be precise, we had the extraordinary review approval based on the request of the discourse. That is what we termed as the service-based tariff. So when or what are the preambles for these service-based tariffs? Because before, what we usually talk about is cost-reflective tariffs. We always talk about cost reflectivity. So the preamble to SBT, before we commence the service-based tariffs, a number of initiatives were introduced by both the regulator and of course the federal government. One of the things that the federal government did was to introduce the power sector recovery program, and the Commission also directed discourse to prepare and submit a performance improvement plan. We prepared a template and we directed the discourse to align with the template, submit a plan covering their expected projected 5 years from 2020 to 2024. Subsequent to that, the discourse also submitted an application for extraordinary tariff review in 2019. The Commission also refilled the order on estimated billing and issued a new order on capping of estimated billing. TCN was also directed to align and prioritize investments with a view to resolving interface challenges with discourse and support discourse in achieving firm improvement in supply to end-use customers. There are also directives to both TCN and discourse to sign service level agreement that are tied to performance indicators with financial remedies for non-performance. The Commission also directed all the discourse to meter all their 33 kV and 11 kV feeders so as to ensure effective monitoring of service quality. There was also directive to suspend disconnection of residential houses during the COVID-19 lockdown period. That was last year. The Commission also engaged the Department of Petroleum Resources on gas supply to power plants. And we commenced since 2019 the process of unbundling or ring fencing of TCN into separate businesses of transmission service provider and independent system operator. We also issued guidelines to discuss on some sub-franchising of their network so as to ensure increased efficiency. Lastly, there was a NAC order on the transition to cost-reflective tariffs within NESI. So I want to take us briefly through some of these initiatives as to what they contain. So we start with the power sector recovery program, which was a program that was approved by the Federal Executive Council in March 2017. And some amendments were made in 2019 with strategies to phase out federal government support to the electricity market by the end of 2021. The power sector recovery program, the PSRP, has a number of initiatives. There are policy interventions, operational interventions, governance proposals, regulatory interventions, and of course, financial interventions. But I think what is key here is the financial intervention or the financing plan of the power sector recovery program. The PSRP provided for payment assurance facility of 701 billion, which was essentially meant to ensure that generation companies are paid to sustain their operations for the period of 2017 to 2018. We all know the challenges of discourse arising from that they are not allowed to charge the actual full cost reflective tariff. The allowed tariff over the years has always been below cost reflectivity. So that means at any given time, even if they're able to make 100% collection, they cannot be able to meet the full revenue requirement of the industry, which means some people must, at the end of the day, be paid short. So this shortage is pushed to the GenCos. So the government provided the 701 billion to fill in that deficit for the period 2017 to 2018. So an additional 600 billion was also provided by the government in 2019. There are also ongoing negotiations with the World Bank to further provide additional support to the PSRP. There are also special interventions, special windows being provided by the central bank, all on the PSRP. But the PSRP is not only about financing governance and governance, it also has to do with safeguard to consumers, because the PSRP still maintain or propose that we should maintain the lifeline tariff. That's for consumers that consume less than 50 kilowatt hour in a month. And of course, there are the proposal for capping of estimated bills to prevent exploitation of unmetered customers, the National Mass Metering Program, which is now going on, and a number of other issues. So aside the PSRP, one of the things the Commission introduced before introducing SBT was the Performance Improvement Plan, which discourse were required to submit. So we have the PIP requirement, I believe, in slide 15. Basically, what we did was to ask the discourse to give us their plan for a 5-year tariff period with emphasis on improvement in energy throughput and delivery, reduction in aggregate technical and commercial losses, metering, new connection, network expansion, safety, customer satisfaction, social responsibility, and overall improvement in service delivery to customers. Said, tell us, what do you intend to do in the next 5 years? Let us have a feel, and let the customers have a feel also of what you intend to do. And we also directed that in doing so, they should have consultation with their stakeholders, with their customers. And all the 11 discourse were monitored, and we ensured that they did this consultation with their customers. So part of the VIP requirement was that also the discourse should provide an outline of their strategic outputs, which they intend to achieve over the 5-year planning horizon, the required human and material resources, and the expected improvement in service to customers. They are also asked to provide the detailed CAPEX and OPEX for the attainment of the stated outcomes and how they intend to finance them. It is not just that you tell us you are going to put in new 33 kV lines from point A to point B, and you just put in figures. You have to tell us what will be the outcome of that. In doing that, how much additional energy are you going to deliver to customers? How many hours of supply will it translate into in terms of increased hours of supply to those customers? And how do you intend to finance it? Are you taking a loan? Is it equity? Whatever. So the major items we requested them to provide in the PIP, that the major CAPEX items include construction and rehabilitation of 33 kV, 11 kV, and 415 volt distribution lines, as well as investments in SCADA, ERP, and network metering. And the PIP provides for clear means of monitoring it. So discourse compliance to VIPs will be monitored to ensure effective utilization and accountability for capital expenditure, because all these investments they make are captured into the end user tariffs. So we made it clear that going forward, we shall ensure that these investments that they projected to do are done, and if they are not, then we will make sure that they are taken out of our tariff computation process. So essentially, this will safeguard against customers paying for investments that have not been made, and also disallow the discourse from claiming undue benefits. So these are some of the things that we did in transiting to the service-based tariff. In March 2020, we issued the NAC order on transition to cost-reflective tariffs, or the service-based tariffs as we term it. So what are the requirements for this transition order? What are the provisions for this? First, we said there won't be any increase in tariff on April 1st, 2020, because the expectation of Nigerians was that by April 1st, the Commission will come out with a new tariff. But the order says there won't be a tariff increase beginning from April 1st, 2020. We requested discourse to submit to the Commission on or before 30th April their detailed plan for attainment of full recovery of capital and allowed return by 30th June 2021, which is in line with the PSRP, because the PSRP provides that by the end of June 2021, the government will no longer be providing subsidy to the sector. So we ask the discourse to make a submission on how they intend to attain that. The order provides also that future tariff reviews will only be based on consultation between discourse and customer clusters, with commitments on rates and the quality of service. This is something that started almost 2 years ago, I believe, in Lagos, in Ikeja Disco, to be precise. We also ask that all the discourse should disaggregate their customers according to the service levels. We all know that we don't enjoy the same level of service hours, arising mainly from infrastructure constraints and of course, the available generation itself. So we said DISCOs will disaggregate their service areas in accordance with quality of service and supported by a proposal for service reflective tariffs. So tell us the number of hours you are providing in this cluster. Tell us how you intend to move them to higher service hours if currently they are getting less than 24 hours. To ensure we monitor this, we demanded that by 30th June, all the DISCOs will provide smart meters at their 11 kV and 33 kV feeders. And these meters will be capable of transmitting data to the Commission. And of course, in line with the PSIP, we reiterated the government's desire or intention to stop further support to the industry by June 2021. There was also the commitment of the federal government to resolve all encumbrances on the financial records of DISCOs arising from tariff-related deficits. So that's what we provided on the order to transition to cost-reflective tariffs. So still as a preamble to the introduction of the service-reflective tariffs, we had the service level agreement, which we asked the DISCOs and the Transmission Company of Nigeria to execute. So what are the features of this SLA? What are the requirements of the SLA? Essentially, the SLA is a joint agreement between TCN and the individual DISCOs. And the essence is for them to align and prioritize investments towards resolving transmission distribution interface bottlenecks and reduce the high instance of tripping on 132 33 kV substations. There are also clearly identified performance indicators and financial remedies for non-performers. The SLA provide that provide that TCN shall supply power based on bi-weekly load forecast submitted by the DISCOs and inform the DISCOs of any planned shutdown at least a week in advance. And if the TCN fails to deliver to the DISCOs or fails to inform the DISCOs 24 hours in advance, then it shall be liable to pay for liquidated damages. Both parties were also directed to collaborate and ensure that average monthly interruption on the various feeders do not exceed the numbers specified in the agreement. There are also liquidated damages for excessive duration of intervention beyond the regulated maximum limit by both parties. So the DISCOs were also directed to install AMR-enabled check meters on all 33 kV feeders. There was also a provision for a liaison officer by each DISCO in the TCN substations, so as to ease communication. The number of interruptions attributable to both parties shall be closely monitored, recorded, and signed off monthly. And the actual data of interruption frequency collected till December 2020 form the basis of decided liquidated damages for excessive frequency interruptions between TCN and DISCOs from this month. So, still on the SLA, we all know that DISCOs cannot just provide power unless they take delivery from the grid, unless they have an embedded generator within their network. So since the service-based tariff provided for classification based on hours of supply, then both TCN and the DISCOs have responsibility of ensuring that these minimum hours of supply are maintained. So part of the SLA provide for sharing of outage hours between TCN and Discourse. So this forms the background for the introduction of the service-based tariffs. So what are the rationales, or what is the rationale for the service-based tariff? I believe that is in slide number 23. The rationale for the service-based tariff. Slide 23, that's 21. We have discussed that, sharing of outage hours. Slide 23, the rationale for service-based tariff. Essentially, in most of the consultations the Commission had with stakeholders, Nigerians always say, give us the power, give us the energy, we'll pay for it. We are paying for darkness. The Discourse are not performing. So the customers are always complaining they are not getting value for the tariff they were being charged. Yes, tariff determination is an art, but it is also a science, because it is based on figures, based on numbers, based on contracts, agreements. So since the customers are saying they are not getting value, those saying that they are not getting value for the tariff they have been charged, those that are paying for darkness, we said, okay, exempt them from that. But those who are getting the required hours of supply or certain minimal hours of supply, then let them pay for what they are receiving. So there are also complaints of poor service delivery by Discourse and TCN, as evidenced by the hours of outage across the country and the number of system collapses. There is also the need to hold the Discourse and TCN more accountable for service delivery. That is why we have what I explained earlier for the TCN and the Discourse to have hours or duration of interruption within which failure of which each must pay for certain must pay liquidated damages. So what are the assumptions for the service-based tariff? That's the current tariff we have. You know, we started this service-based tariff in September last year. And as at that time, the figures we had for Nigerian inflation was 12.82%. The official exchange rate was 383 naira to the dollar. The US inflation was 1%. Generation cost was 25 naira 60 kobo. The end user cost reflective tariff, after putting in all the cost for the generation, the transmission, and of course the distribution, was 56 naira. So the commission said, or the commission came out with an end user allowed tariff of 44 naira 78 kobo, based on the presumption that we gradually move up to cost reflectivity by July 2021. So we had a tariff shortfall of 11 naira 22 kobo, which the government was supposed to fund. Somehow the tariff was suspended between the 28th of December 2020 to 31st of October to allow for negotiation between labor and the federal government. So it only was restored from 1st of November. So using the same assumptions, the government directed that the end user allowed tariffs should be reduced by about 2 naira. So we ended up with 42 naira 50 kobo. And of course, the tariff shortfall increased, which means the government funding increased. These are what are the objectives? Okay, what are the objectives of this service-based tariff? What do we intend to achieve by having a service-based tariff? First, we want to ensure that the prices charged by discos are fair to customers and are sufficient to allow the discos to cover the cost of operation and a reasonable amount on the capital invested, which is in line with the EPSR Act, which is in line with what we are mandated to do. Secondly, we believe it will provide a path to a transition to a fully service-based cost-reflective tariff by July 2021, when, as per the power sector recovery program, the government will stop providing subsidy. It also provides an opportunity to reclassify and disaggregate customers based on its discourse commitment on quality of service to customer clusters. You have service bands, some have 20 hours of supply, some 16, some 12, some 8, some 4. And you have a commitment to move them gradually to higher service hours. We also ensure, part of the objective is also to ensure that the customer tariffs are commensurate and aligned with the quality and availability of power supply as committed to these service clusters. We also, another objective is to ensure sustained improvement in reliability and quality of supply by incentivizing discourse to uptake more power. So the service-based tariff provide a framework for settlement also of imbalances between TCN and discourse on delivery and uptake of available energy in accordance with industry documents. It also provides a framework that ensures customers' tariffs are consistent with the services they receive from DISCO. It is also meant to develop and implement a framework for enforcing market discipline in respect of market remittances and managing future revenue shortfalls in the industry. It also supports the interim arrangements of payments to the electricity market and reaffirm the payment securitization requirement and flow of funds from DISCOs to, of course, NVET and MO. So what are the new tariff classifications? Before, what we used to have are residential R1, R2, commercial C1, ever industrial, and all that. So now, based on service, we now have a reclassification based on hours of supply. So, but we still maintain, as far the provision of the power sector recovery program, we still maintain the lifeline customers. That's the R1 customers, those that consume less than 50 kilowatt hours in a month. So they're still there, and their tariff is still 4 naira per kilowatt hour. For those on band A, now, those are the ones receiving minimum 20 hours of supply per day. Those on band B, minimum of 16 hours per day. Those in band C, minimum of 12 hours, band D 8 hours, and band E 4 hours. We committed the discourse in ensuring that over a given period of time, they should be able to move customers from lower bands, lower service bands to higher service bands, from E to D, from D to C, from C to B over time. So those are some of the commitments we had. So the last review the Commission had was the December 2020 minor review, which was a review of the September tariff order. So what are the assumptions? What were the basis for the review? We had an inflation of 12 point in November, December last year, we are talking of inflation of 12.82%. But when in December 2020, we commenced the review, inflation was 14.9%. US inflation has also moved from 1% to 1.2. Exchange rate, official exchange rate has moved to 397. Well, 397 includes a provision of 2% that we add on it as a policy. So generation cost has also moved, arising from the exchange rate from 25 naira to 27 naira 10 kobo. So we ended up with an end user cost reflective tariff of 58 naira 10 kobo. And we moved the allowed tariff to 45 naira 30 kobo, giving a tariff shortfall of 12 naira 80 kobo. And the plan was that all things being equal, including these economic indices, that by July, we won't have a tariff shortfall, that the exchange rate will remain the same thing, inflation will remain the same thing, generation cost the same thing, our end user cost reflective tariff will still be 58 naira 10 kobo, and then customers will be charged 58 naira 10 kobo. Please, let's note that this is the aggregate national cost reflective tariff and the end user allowed tariff. This is an aggregate for all the 11 discos. In some places, it is higher. In some others, it is also lower. Down below, you'll see the cumulative tariff shortfall that has accrued. As at December 2020, we are talking of 2.3 trillion tariff shortfall. This 2.3 trillion tariff shortfall is going to be paid by some man, and that some man must probably be the federal government of Nigeria, because they have already paid over 1.5 of that, about 1.7 or so. So that means going forward, this is not a sustainable business. The government cannot continue to be paying or subsidizing electricity. If we add the projected 180 billion for January to June, which is even going to be higher because we have already suspended the increase. We are still at an average of 42 naira 50 kobo or so. So what constitutes this? What constitutes all these costs? These are the power purchase agreements we have on the grid, an average of 27 naira 10 kobo. We have our successor thermal station, that is the privatized thermal stations, Egbin and Co. Their average tariff is 32 naira 15 kobo. Note that these are tied to agreements. They all have power purchase agreement with the bulk trader, an agreement that will run for 20 years, and it is in US dollars for all the GenCos. And these agreements provide for payments, two-tier payments, capacity and energy. So for the thermal stations, the aggregate average tariff is 32.15 kobo. For the hydros, the successful hydros, that's north-south power and mainstream, that's Jeba, Shiroro, and Kainji, the three hydros, it is 18.24 kobo. Olorin Sugar and Omotosho, 31 naira 62 kobo. The NIPP plants, 25 naira 45. Ajib Okpai plant, 26 naira 33. The Shell plant, 15 naira 71 kobo. Ibom Power, 32 naira 35. Omoku, 33 naira 20. Transamadi, 32 naira 35. Azura, 14 naira 44. And that's how we have this average generation tariff of 27 naira 10 kobo for the power plants. So this is a breakdown of the average tariffs, overall average tariff, what constitute it, what constitute the total average tariff of 58 naira 10 kobo as at today. So we have the CBN loan.
I think there are just 3 more slides till the end. So
yes. So the cost reflective tariff versus allowed tariff, this is just a pictorial showing what we have done over the years. The rising cost in 2015, 40 naira. By December 2020, it has moved to 56 naira and 58 naira by 2021. And the allowed tariff has moved from 25 to 45. And tariff shortfall has risen from 15 naira in 2015 to 28 naira in 2019. And the intention is to bring it down to at least 30 naira by this year, but it depends on government policy, because as it is, now we have rolled back what we have done. So we can look at the next slide. So the industry shortfall, maybe in summary, we are talking of between 2015 to 2019, we are talking of 1.8 trillion. 1.8 trillion. So what are the impacts of this shortfall? It is what I call a vicious cycle. Because yes, people can complain that we don't have light, we are paying for darkness. It is really understandable. But people also can complain that it is too expensive. But when we say it is too expensive, we should compare the cost to alternative generation. So we can also continue to be focused in bringing down tariffs. But in doing so, we become, we are sending wrong signal, not only to investments, but we are virtually denying, I mean, wrong signal to new investors, but also the existing ones, because we are denying them the ability to expand, the ability to do a number of things. For GenCos, they are supposed to, the privatized GenCos, that's the successor GenCos, they are supposed to recover capacity. So unless they get fed, they may not be able to have the necessary financing to recover capacity. They may not be able to have the necessary financing to expand. For the TCN2, it is the same thing. Unless the money is there, it would be difficult for them to do the required investments, which means they will continue to be constrained to will the available generation capacity. So it is a whole lot of challenges caused by the inability of the industry or the sector to charge the appropriate tariff, collect the appropriate tariff, and of course, appropriate it to or pay it to the various service providers. So it all impacts negatively, and it creates a cycle of inefficiency, which we are all suffering from. So in conclusion, I think we can go to the last slide, or second to the last slide. I think that's slide 36. How do we make this? How do we make the SVT work? How do we make the industry work? What the Commission intends to do first is to hold the players now more accountable. In particular, in terms of generating, transmitting, and distributing electricity, we are going to hold them accountable for strict compliance to the merit order dispatch. So this is something which all of us in the industry have agreed that the merit order dispatch must work. So the regulator also is insisting on smart metering of feeders and distribution transformers to monitor actual energy distributed to consumers. This we have already started getting results or info or data from the monitors we installed, and it is going to be a continuous exercise. So we expect that the discourse also will be self-monitoring themselves through periodic submission of reports, which are done on weekly, monthly, and even daily basis to the Commission. As usual, we expect that customers should be able to promptly settle their bills, and in case they have issues, they should be able to raise it in line with our complaints mechanism. We intend to this year engage ourselves on extensive customer education and provision of software applications that can be used to monitor electricity supply, including daily hours of supply, time to restore after outage, and frequency or number of interruptions. We hope within this year, we should be able to have an application that can be able to do that, which individual customers or consumers of electricity can be able to have it on their phones, and they can be able to do that monitoring, and they can be able to report discrepancy between what is being promised them on their service ban and what they are seeing or what they're experiencing in their various homes. So thank you so much, and apology for taking too long. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, sir. That was a truly informative and comprehensive overview of the NNRC and what they're doing with regards to the tariffs. Now let's move on to, I know there have been many questions on the side, and we will get to those after the next presentation. So now over to Mr. George Itomi for some remarks from the ECHO Disco. Mr. Itomi, over to you, sir.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. Let me start by thanking the Lagos Chamber of Commerce for an industry for this, for organizing this webinar. One must not underestimate the importance of information as a tool to empowering consumers. And many times comments are passed on what's going on in the electricity sector. It is either predicated on erroneous conceptions or total lack of information. So webinars like this will help demystify the sector. There are so many technical terms you can even see from the presentations that are made. But I think bottom line for the consumer is that, am I getting value for money? And this is really where this whole conversation should take us. Thirdly, I would want to remark that the intentions behind privatizing the power sector are as noble as the intentions that attended the privatization of the banking sector, telecoms sector, just to mention a few. And we know the positive effect those privatizations have had on our economy. In fact, if you asked me, if we were doing things right, the power sector reform should have come ahead of these other reforms. Because if you ask many of these other players in these sectors, they will tell you that over 40% of their costs goes into providing themselves energy. So if there was an efficient power sector, most of the complaints we have today would be reduced to the barest minimum. Now, the other point I also want to mention is that, like with most commanding heights of the economy, power is highly political. So even from the process of privatization up to the incidents that attended privatization, most of it are colored by political considerations. What NEC cannot tell you, and you can see from the presentation, what they planned and should have done by law, each time they do it, they'll have to roll it back. It's essentially because of political pressure. That's understandable, because for politicians, they listen to their constituents and try to pander to them. But honestly speaking, what we should do is to empower the regulator so that in a truly privatized environment, the regulator sets the role, is free to play that balancing role. And the NEC set it all out. You can see from generation to transmission to distribution to the customers, they need to balance the scales such that in the end, they are fair to all persons. But then, if from time to time you have a supervening authority that, based purely on political calculation, says don't do this or do something, and they have to roll back orders, there are implications for the growth of the sector. Anybody who is in this sector will tell you that the primary problem in the sector is lack of liquidity, period. And it has come because the cost of the product and the regulated price for selling it is huge. And nobody operates any successful business in that environment. And it is grappling with this shortfall that has been taking all our time in this sector. The federal government itself has finally, on account of the twin impact of COVID and the collapse in oil prices, found out that they simply cannot continue to carry this burden. If you ask me, if the plans upon privatization were allowed to happen, many of the tariff increases or that jump we all saw in September would not have happened. It would have been gradual, because NEC would have simply been doing what the law expects of them, twice yearly adjustments based on inflation and forex movements, and then 5 yearly major reviews based on all the other parameters that they have mentioned. And this would have been gradual if you look at the way exchange rates have moved over this period. But that wasn't done. We played the ostrich. And at the time where we simply couldn't carry the burden over, it's like somebody who is carrying a load. You can either put that load gently down, or you can get to a breaking point, or you just throw it away. The bang will be heavier, and this is what we're experiencing. So, well, as they say, it is better late than never. We are now at a point, as the very able presentation by NEC has shown, where we're going to have a contract-based market, where every player will be held accountable to their obligations. And really, the regulator should simply be allowed to enforce these regulations. We've seen it work very successfully in the banking sector. We've seen it work very successfully in the telecom sector. Let us just allow it work for the power sector, because we don't have much choices anyway. The truth is that if we're going to stop being over-dependent on one product, which in this case is crude oil, then we must fix power, because it holds the key to the diversifying the income streams that will come on account of opening up the economy. I have no doubt or no question in my mind that if the regulator is given a free hand and the sector is properly regulated, in the coming months and years, you will begin to see the benefits of the privatization. We left it a bit late, but like I said, it's better late than never. From the point of view of distribution companies, I want to correct one misconception. People say they pay for darkness, they pay for this, but the truth is, the only way distribution company makes money is if they sell power. So it makes absolutely no sense for you to hoard power and then expect to make money. It's not even the kind of product you can hoard. It's a wasting asset. You can't even hoard it. So when you get it, you must push it out, whether or not it's being paid for. I think what we should be concerned about would be how efficiently this power is sent out. And that is why we have frequent disagreements with the transmission company. And because when they go into this, I'm sure you've heard several times, discos are rejecting power. Discos say, no, you are giving me power in an area where I cannot collect money, and I have market obligations to meet. It goes back, forth, and back and forth. So hopefully, with the realignment that is now taking place, and we've been having very great conversations in the last 6 months, many of these things will be straightened out, because we'll now all be bound by contracts. And as the next presentation shows, this will be monitorable. So you can actually allocate faults and penalties consequently. So for the consumer, what is your role? One thing we must accept as Nigerians is that because power was provided as a social service in the past, you still have consumers who believe that they're entitled to it. So energy theft or energy bypass is one of the biggest businesses around. And whilst we scream and shout about discos being efficient, which is valid, I'm not making light of it, consumers must also live up to their responsibility. I think it's our joint and collective responsibility to ensure that the power sector works, because the overall benefits are incalculable. If we get it right, all the MSMEs that are struggling today, and I can see where the LTCI is coming from, because some of the biggest people who are groaning under the inefficient power structure are your manufacturers and your members. Most of these will grow. They won't go overnight, I'll quickly tell you, but they will slowly go away. Because even with its difficulty, at least in the CoDisco where I am a non-executive director, there's been a marked improvement in our services. In fact, what we're now facing with this banding are consumers who are saying, look, is there a way I can reduce what I pay? Not because they don't have the service, because some of them are getting close to 23 hours a day. So it comes to this issue of, okay, change your consumption habits. Do you have a swimming pool? Does it have to be on 24/7? Do you iron your clothes? Do your house help just iron willy-nilly, just put the iron on? Do you have water heaters? You will get to that point, just like we do in every advanced countries, where you begin to take interest in the component parts of your consumption habits and regulate them. So that way you consume and pay for what you really want. Going forward, I think the prospects are good. What it calls for is patience. And I look forward to working with not just our consumers, the regulator, and all the members of the value chain. The last point I want to make is that the 60% for the thermal plants, that's those who depend on this massive, depend on gas. 60% of that cost actually goes to gas. And one of the biggest problems in the tariff component is gas. So the issue needs to be addressed head on, because that gas is still essentially, we're still dealing with the NNPC, federal government and whatnot. How do we manage gas costs so that if we have many more gas to power projects and those prices can come down, it will concomitantly reflect on electricity tariffs. You can see the graph that was shown during the presentation, the various costs. Some GenCos are producing at 40 naira per kilowatt hour. Some are doing 32, some are doing 25. The simple question to ask is, how come somebody is doing 40, somebody else is doing 25, 30? So there must be a way we can manage those resource base so that it can work when we input them into our tariff calculation to the benefit of consumers. All these will be addressed, I believe, as we move forward. I will stop at this point and I'll be happy to take questions. I already see from the chat box that many people are interested in what's happening to them. And even though I've seen one or two questions concerning Ikeja, I'm happy to answer them because the model is the same for all 11 discos. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir, for that rousing set of remarks, covering the sector from your disco's point of view. Now we move on to the interactive session. I think what we'll do is, on this interactive session, I'll go through some of the questions and issues that we have penned down. And the chairman also, I'm sure, has a few questions and comments to make for both of you. And then after we do that for about 20 minutes or so, we'll move to the question and answer session. We'll leave the floor open for our online participants to address some of their concerns. So does that work for both of you, Mr. Sharif and Mr. Itomi?
Absolutely.
All right, perfect. So the first question I wanted to put forth to NERC would be about this funding meters, and actually to echo this as well for their point of view. So the central bank funding of meters, how is this being utilized and how is it being implemented? The central bank, the CBN funding. So Mr. Mahmoud from NERC, if you can go first.
I think I need to really understand your question clearly.
Well, there are some funds that are set aside by the central bank which are supposed to go directly to metering. So what we want to know now is how these funds were being utilized for the metering process at the disco level. And then the second side of that would be the FGN free meter distribution through the discos and what's happening with that.
Okay, let me start by saying I think that there is, to me, some confusion on the mass metering program. When you said free meters by the federal government, I'm not sure there is anything free meters. Yes, the federal government or the president has directed that meters should be financed, and financing is coming from the CBN. The CBN has issued its own guidelines for these financings to the discos. It is a loan, and there are certain preconditions that must be met by each disco before disbursement is made. And this loan is not only going to be restricted to discos, it is also going to be extended to meter asset providers, meter manufacturers. So it is a holistic intervention on the metering business. So I believe the DISCO, ECO, or IKEJA are in the best position to tell you the requirement expected of them from the CBN and how they are able to meet this requirement and how they end up in accessing whatever they have so far accessed from the available funds. But before then, maybe I need to make it clear that prior to this CBN intervention, you know, this mass metering program is supposed to be done in phases. We are supposed to have the phase 0 of it, the phase 1, which is the CBN financing, that is targeted exclusively to the discos, the local manufacturers and assemblers, and the expectation is that at least 1.5 million meters will be provided within this, within quarter 1 to 4 of 2021, that is within this year. Then the phase 2 will be the World Bank procurement of these meters. So probably ECHO can be able to expatiate on this. Thank you.
Yes, sure, I can. I mentioned to you that in the last 4 to 6 months, we've been having very robust discussions where the entire value chain is being aligned, and the CBN has been central. CBN and Ministry of Finance and NEC have been central to these discussions. In the process, this issue of the metering shortfall kept coming up. And if you recall, we've had CAPME before, which didn't quite meet its expectations. We then had MAP, which was faltering. But baseline to many of these things was that in an era where there was a shortfall in the tariff, the issue of metering always is a challenge because discos argue that metering is a function of the tariffs. So the issue would be, how do I deploy my capital? Do I do meters and ignore other things? So we had those issues. Pressure was on consumers to provide the meters for themselves. So based on these discussions that are going on, the CBN has stepped in, and what they're doing is providing funding, which a loan to the discos, and you qualify based on the fact that there are so many reset buttons that are being pressed now in the sector. Your ability to meet with the waterfall, which means that as these tariffs have gone up, there are new minimum remittance obligations. You sign on to them. That would be a precondition. Secondly, those maps who had already brought in meters but had difficulty because new tariffs were introduced just at the point of these meters landing. Federal government has removed the 35% tariff so that these meters, which were stuck as it were, because the NEC approved price was below what it would have been, and there was no incentive for maps to go forward with that arrangement. They will now come into the bracket. So the phase 0 will be for those meters that are already in country to do. And then phase 1 will tilt in favor of those Nigerians who have invested in metering plants here. They come in as as either SKDs, CKDs, whatever the case would be, as a means in the process of making meters available, also creating jobs and other opportunities for Nigerians. Now, the metering gap in total is anything between 6 and 7 million. So the desire is that by another year, 2 years, we would have totally closed that gap. But metering, as you know, is a continuous business, because when you're done, you still need to go back into your network. There are meters who have outlived their life cycles. You need to change those ones. So it's a continuous business, as the case would be. But what is the effect of all these? The federal government has basically just asked the regulator, let the discos give these meters out. You use the word free, and as you were corrected by NEC, there's nothing really free. Somebody somewhere is bearing that cost. But the idea is that these meters, upon application, will be deployed in mass fashion to those who are first unmetered, before you then go to the other metering scales on your books. So this is the way it will work. And as we speak, many discos who have met with the conditions have already started drawdown. I know Eco Disco did this drawdown, I think it was last week. Some have done it before, and they've started their meter rollout program. If we keep pace, we should be able to meet with most of the metering requirements. So that's what, is there anything else you want to know about the meters? So that's the story about the meters.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much, both sirs. The next question, or the next point I wanted to bring up was in response to something Mr. Sharif said earlier, comparing the costs of power generation to other forms of power. And the implication there was that it was expensive. However, as a lot of people are becoming increasingly aware, the cost of renewable generation is now competing with, and in many instances, lower than traditional forms of power generation, like gas or hydroelectricity. So that being said, the point is, what is next plan going forward? And for the discos, yes, your investments that you've already made, as well as GENCOs, how do your plans going forward intend to address the renewables power sector coming on stream in increasing waves as we go along?
Okay, thank you so much. Yes, the cost of renewable has been going down, and of course the Nigerian government has a policy on the integration of renewable energy into the grid. And if you can recall, the commission years ago even licensed about a number of solar generators. But unfortunately, up to today, they are yet to sign a contract with the bulk trader. So we can talk about renewables. We can talk about that renewables are getting cheaper. But there is a process of bringing energy to the grid. And this process is beyond the commission. When I say beyond the commission has its own role, and it has done its role. It has licensed a number of renewable generators. But then these renewable generators too must have off-takers. And who are these off-takers? The off-takers, of course, currently are the Nigerian Bulk Electricity Trading Company, and of course the DISCOs themselves. Because by law, they can also buy generation from other sources outside the NBED. They can also even have embedded generation within their distribution network. So that's my response on this. Thank you.
Perhaps I should add that let's not forget that close to 50% of Nigerians are still not on the grid. So renewables will need to, first of all, address those issues. And then, yes, exactly, because we must look at the entire power consumption holistically. We can't continue to concentrate on the existing customer base. We need to broaden that. And then, yes, like Mr. Sheriff mentioned, we DISCOs are constantly approached by IPPs for one thing or the other. But like we said, there is a delicate balance that needs to be met when you do these things, because people have invested, there are existing contracts, so you must be careful not to cross lines, otherwise you're going to create more problems than you would have. But one thing is clear, renewables have come to stay, the market will grow, and they will give competition to the other existing sources of energy. So everybody needs to be more efficient if they are going to have a future in this industry. Thank you.
Thank you for those responses. I have a question here. I think people want to know a little bit about where we are with the MAP program, and then also what are the learning points from the previous CAPME program that are being implemented alongside this MAP program. So let me give that first to Mr. George this time, and then to
So who, sir? To the commissioner?
No, to you first. Let's flip it
to me. To me.
Yes, sir.
Oh, CAPME. Okay, CAPME, as you know, was replaced by MAP.
Yes.
And I think part of the shortfall of the CAPME thing was that at the CAPME, I think if I recall, it even came in before the industry was privatized. And I know that a number of us inherited a situation in which people have paid for meters, they have not been given the meters, and the meters were not installed. So many DISCOs were playing catch up with CAPME. And given the pressure, the demand, we just couldn't cope. So the regulator in his wisdom then said, okay, introduce MAP. MAP was meant to be third-party meter asset providers who would source for their funds, do whatever needs to be done, and the DISCOs will simply just enter into a contract with them to meter their network. But the MAPs themselves started struggling. A number of them were policy measures outside their control. For example, this issue of the custom duty that I mentioned about was one of them. And then because it's a heavily regulated industry, the margins are very thin. That's another thing consumers don't know. The margins are very, very thin. And if any one of your calculations goes or it's so difficult to plow back. So many of them would rather wait to that point, because ideally under the MAP, you were supposed to just roll out and then pay over a 10-year period. But many of them prefer to wait until the customers pay, and then they go and they give priority to customers who pay for the meters, which in a sense defeated the whole idea behind MAP. But hopefully with the NMMP, the National Mass Metering Program, we've learned from the failure of both CAPME and MAP, and then we should be able to plug that in. Already, as I told you, the meter rollout has begun, and I hope it will be aggressive enough so that as we've moved towards a service-based tariff, contract-based market, everybody needs to have mechanisms by which their consumption is measurable, and therefore you can enforce your contract. And metering is at the heart of this business. So for my money, I think the NNMP will succeed where CAPME and the strict MAP, in a sense, faltered.
Thank you. So Sharif, do you have anything to add to that?
I think he has done justice to that.
Thank you, sir. I want to ask a personal question, but it's relevant before going into questions thrown in by the public. My personal question is as relates to MITO and the tariffs. And my feeling is, while I understand how the MITO has been, how the MITO formula works and the metrics used to generate it, I am not sure that it takes into account the purchasing power of the average Nigerian, the consumers who you intend to pay for this electricity. Because going by the recent tariff increases, I'm not so sure that the average Nigerian can afford to pay for this power as the tariff goes up. Because even as we are now, the MITO is not cost reflective of where it should be as of today. It's been halted many times along the way, and the most recent increase was almost a knee-jerk reaction prompted by, from the discos coming back upwards, back to the Gencos, because it's no longer feasible for them to make money at those low rates. And while I understand that from a purely investment point of view, from a consumer point of view, it's also not sustainable for the consumer. So there has to be a way to fill in that stopgap. And I don't say what plan, but I don't say what is being thought of to address this gap between what's being paid to the generating and distribution companies and what's being asked to be paid from the consumer. So again, Mr. George, you first, and then we'll go to Mr. Sharif.
I feel you, because even though people imagine that if in bands A, B, and C, you have the means to pay. When you reduce it to numbers, if you used to pay, say, 100K a month, by these new increases, some go as high as 200. If it was 200, it doubles. I mean, no matter how rich you are, it's going to tell on your pocket. And yet, like you correctly identified, we are not yet at the cost reflective tariff yet. But what I would say with regard to that is that consumers should actually begin to worry about their electricity use. Many of us don't have user discipline when it comes to energy. There are still many places, even in the estate I live, the street lights are left on during the day. In many houses, your security lights are left on. People have swimming pool. People don't want to inconvenience people, and that's because when tariffs were low, these things, you acquire these habits. A lot of change in consumption habit will help. Look, I have a friend who were playing, tennis, and he complained just similar to what you said. And I just asked him a simple question: please go check. Do you have 1, 2, 3 at home? And he true enough went to check and said, oh, he never even thought about it. And when he changed the user thing, his consumption dropped by about 40%. So a lot of the thing will shift to customer usage. This is not to say you don't have a point about managing tariff increases. We will continue to make that point. And that's why I said that if we go to the cost of gas, which is 60% of that tariff, any tariff you see that's based on the thermal production, 60% of it is gas. And we have gas plenty. So is there an argument, is there a case for getting gas at cheaper? We asked the NNPC, but NNPC said, look, the people who are coming to work the gas are spending dollars to turn your gas into value. And it's not fair to ask them to take a cut. But one way or the other, something will have to give. But then you must also agree with me that as your diesel cost also drops, you must look at your overall spending profile on power. People tend to just assume that, oh, diesel is a given. No, it's not a given. It doesn't have to be a given. People spend phenomenally higher because if the rates don't lie, if you burn diesel, you are doing like 100 naira per kilowatt hour. And we're talking for bands A, B, C, between 50 and 58. So it's still phenomenally cheaper. So don't make diesel a habit. What you should insist is to get the service so that there's less need for diesel. In my church, for example, since March, we've never bought diesel. Since March last year. because our electricity has improved, and we're able to see the overall, the holistic cost. And we thank our stars, or thank God that this has come down. So that's the way I would suggest people should look at it. Look at your consumption habits, and please include diesel and other forms. Many people have inverters, so many different things that draw so much of energy when power from the mains comes. And they don't know that it all goes into your energy cost. So people must look at their consumption habits. And then on our side, the discussions will continue. Whatever improvements need to be made. And don't forget, the fact that the prices are going up now doesn't mean they won't come down in the future. Because as the market opens up, more competition comes in, similar to what you had in the telecom space. People will come and offer alternatives to you. And any disco who wants to be in business must be in the forefront of looking for cheaper sources of energy.
Thank you, sir. So Sharif, have you got anything to add to that?
Yes, I have a number of things to say. You mentioned you are talking about affordability. Yes, I can tell you there is always this argument that the grid power is very expensive, but it is not really true. To be honest, it is not really true. Because as it is now, right now, we have a number of renewable suppliers supplying remote areas. And you'll cry when you hear what our people in the villages are paying upgrade. Some are paying up to 200 naira per kilowatt, 200 naira per kilowatt hour. So if we're talking of, even if it is 80 naira, that is less than 50% of what these poor people, poor Nigerians are. And still, we, the privileged ones that are connected to the grid, are still being subsidized by government. Who is the best? I mean, who should be subsidized under this circumstance? The person in the village, the person that don't have access to the grid, doesn't have access to water, to good roads and all that? Well, that may be a debate actually. Then what is the government doing? The government has a provision in the Act, in the Electric Power Sector Reform Act, of a Power Consumer Assistance Fund. This is a funding that is supposed to be provided, or support that is supposed to be provided to the less privileged amongst us, those that are considered unable to afford the bills. So the Commission is working together with the Minister of Finance and Minister of Power towards setting up this fund. So hopefully within this year, we'll come out with something regarding that. Then there is also the need to educate consumers on the need to engage themselves in conserving energy, on being more efficient in their usage of electricity, as stated by the last speaker. You go around our villages, travel, let's say from where I live here in Abuja to Kano on the road. All the villages from Abuja to Kaduna, you will see bulbs carrying 50, 60, 100 watts on. When you can have a bulb, an efficient bulb of 5 watts that can serve that purpose. So I think both the Commission and of course the discourse have a lot to do regarding that. If we are able to conserve energy, we can be able to save cost. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir.
Okay, I have a question.
Chairman
Yes.
of
Yes.
Mr. Demi.
Yes. Okay. Okay, thank you very much. And Mr. Mahmood, I mean, it was very good presentation from you. At least we were able to clear some issues that a lot of people will be interested to know about. And the remarks also from Mr. Tommy, I mean, they were very beautiful remarks. And on this, my own question is, in the from beginning of January, I think from 1st to about 22nd, it was estimated that about 20.5 billion was lost in the power sector due to the fact that the discos rejected the energy that was being transmitted to them. Well, looking at this, I would say, is it due to problem of infrastructure, or there are still some other issues or other things that we need to know? So it would be nice if you can just shed more light on that for us. Thank you.
Do you want me to go first?
Yes, please. Thank you, Mr.
On this, you know, I said in my remarks that there's so much blame game going on between discos and TCN over this issue of load rejection or no load rejection. The blame is on both sides. The truth is that if anybody wants to look at what happened, is that TCN is still entirely government. Their budgetary system makes expenditure very difficult. They have to go get National Assembly approval. They cannot respond very quickly to faults, and everybody knows that they don't have the capacity to transmit all that's generated now. And the few times they've boasted the peak transmission, the grid collapsed because it just couldn't take it. They need to invest in technology. They don't even have a functioning SCADA. I don't even think they have a SCADA at all. In this day and age, you can't manage your system without some sort of IT integration. So that happens. On the distribution side, on account of all the issues I've mentioned to you, most of the network is old. I mean, these are networks that are dated pre-independence and all that. Some are functioning, some are not functioning. And so you see that, sooner provide transformers for a particular area, 4 times the population you provided for go into that area. Everybody's crammed into one particular transformer. And you can't make a capital expenditure because for that to be going into your tariff, the regulator must approve it. And the regulator will not approve it because they don't want the tariffs to jump. So it's chicken and egg. But all that will be things of the past, given the reset that is taking place. As I told you, it makes no sense for discos to reject power when the only way you can make money is to sell the power. We will take the power. The only problem now is that discos do not have a say as to where their power goes to because it's controlled by TCN, who do it on account of, because they want to balance the grid. So when discos say, look, I don't want power here because I can't collect money, give it to me here. The TCN can say, I can't do that because my grid will become unstable. So it's chicken and egg. But as I said, trust me, the reset has happened. Many of these issues will be done. As you know, the Siemens initiative primarily targets improvement of both the TCN transmission and distribution networks. And you will begin to see improvements from this point on. The story will be different than it was in the past. I hope I've helped you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yes. Yeah.
Mr. Demi, hold on. Well, the last
okay, thank you.
Noted about Siemens.
Okay, hello.
Sorry, Mr. Mahmood. Go ahead.
Okay, can I maybe expatiate further on that? I'm not sure as to where the issue of 20 billion or so. I read it in the paper too, that the market operators said the market lost 20 billion or so. But of importance, I think, is that going forward, already the service level agreement that TCN and the discourse have signed will ensure that there is nothing like load rejection. it will cease to exist. As part of the service level agreement, both TCN and Discos now have outage hours that they are supposed to agree on every feeder. For example, on feeders that are expected to have 20 hours of supply, it means the only available outage hours allowed are 4. We have 24 hours in a day. So TCN is supposed to have 20 of that outage hours, and Discourse maximum of 80 of that outage hours. So anything above that, above 20% of 4 hours, 20% of 4 hours is 48 minutes. On that feeder, TCN will be held accountable. So these are some of the things that we have put in place. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. It was a very brief point I wanted to add to the end of Mr. George's comments about the Siemens initiative. But has the federal government made a plan on how to fund that initiative? Because most of the sums in that document, I don't know how many of our viewers have been able to go through it. You can find it on Google. We're talking billions of dollars. For me, the only part of it, or the most important part of it, is something you alluded to, the SCADA system, which will allow the different GENCOs and DISCOs and TCN to actually have a holistic overview of the network and know where power is required. And that alone, if I remember off the top of my head, was about $600 million. Where is this funding supposed to come from? Without this funding, we can't upgrade our network. And I don't think there's a plan in place as yet on how to fund these network upgrades as suggested by Siemens.
Well, my understanding is that the Siemens initiative is coming in the form of a soft loan to the federal government over, a long period, 20 years. I'm not sure what the period will be. And so the fund, it's coming with funding. So I don't think funding will be the issue, but it must be sensibly deployed. I agree entirely with you. Don't forget that part of the Siemens program, the third stage, is to ramp up generation. So you cannot be talking about ramping up generation if you don't fix transmission and distribution, which is why the first phase targets those two. So my understanding that it's coming in already. There is an SPV that has been set up by the federal government that will be the recipients of the fund, which will be ring-fenced and dedicated entirely for this purpose. So I think we'll get there.
Excellent. Thank you, sir. Chairman. Chairman,
I think it would be nice to move to others because there are quite a number of people here and they have their own questions. So let's take questions from others.
But before then, if I can say something still on the Siemens, just like the last speaker mentioned, the federal government has set up an SPV, that's FGN Power. They have already appointed the executives to run that. But the thing is, it's not really money that is coming in. Siemens are going to provide the equipment. They are going to provide the equipment. And they even expect Nigeria or Nigerian government to install that. All what they are going to deliver is equipment, and that is it. And of course, there is expected counterpart funding from the government. Already the government has released its first tranche of that counterpart funding. So I think on that, to a large extent, we are on course. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that clarification, Mr. Mahmood. Excellent. Can we throw up some open questions to the floor? 10 minutes of that, and then give our vote of thanks. So I see Mr. Shehu Umar has a question. I don't know how to actually activate him. Mr. Henry, Can you give two people have their hands up, Mr. Shehu Umar and Mr. James Edwards? How do we unmute their mics?
Hello. Hello.
Sir.
This is Shehu speaking.
So,
Yes, good day, and good day, everyone. So my question is to Mahmoud regarding the service reflective tariffs. And so there is a concern that consumers are being forced to pay for some sort of misalignment of the power sector, right? While it is okay that over time, I mean, these service reflective tariffs will show improvements. Now, what is NEC doing to be able to ensure that these prices come down? So when you look at the generation and you say hydro is 18 naira and then Azura is 40, yet to a large extent, you're not using all the capacity. I mean, I just learned that there was investment. Mainstream is upgrading their turbines. So at what point does NEC go into looking at how to optimize where the lowest cost of generation is coming to the grid so that the price that you're pushing to consumers is reasonable? Because, I mean, if we had all of the power coming from hydro, right, these charges that you're passing on to consumers will be much less. Also, if we didn't have Azura, it will also be much less. So, I mean, what is NEC doing on that side? Because I understand that mainstream is probably not pushing power at full capacity into the grid. They probably have turbines that are not used. The question is, I mean, wouldn't it have been better to get those turbines in use? So when you look at the presentation of the cost of generation and the emphasis on gas, when hydro is like half the price, what exactly is the regulator doing? So that's my first question. I'll just be quick about the second question. You spoke about a smart metering app for consumers, right? Is this a NEC initiative? Is it giving information from the feeders? Is it giving information from the meters? Because from the point where the service reflective tariff is measured, which is the feeder, to the smart meter where the consumer gets, I mean, that's what's called, or the service line connected to his house, the reality is that anything could happen in between, right? So if I have an app that's showing me the feeder is up, yet 2 days down, my transformer is blown and there's problems, how is that of value to me, right? So I just want to be clear when you say an app for consumers, where is it picking its information from? It's very important. If it's not picking from my house or the service line or the meter and it's picking from the feeder, there could be a lot of things in between. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Let me start with the last part of your question. The app we are talking about actually is an app that consumers, end-use consumers can be able to have and be able to monitor supply to their residences, offices, and the rest. For the feeder, we already have directed Discos to install smart meters, which we can be able to read. So we want the customer also to be able to monitor performance on his own, so that in case he reports, in case we are unable to pick the information, just like we mentioned, that something can happen between the feeder to the transformer and all that. So at least there is a basis that we can be able to use in questioning or interrogating the Disco. And this app is something which we have had a number of discussions with some developers, and they have made presentations to us, and we hope hopefully within this year we can be able to have it out. Then regarding your other issue, that's on generation cost. We already have an order or guidelines as to how generators are dispatched. And of course, the whole essence is to ensure that we have the least or the minimal generation cost on the grid. And we ensure compliance with that. The first on the list, of course, are the hydros. And the hydros are almost 100% dispatch. That is in line with the guidelines. So I'm not sure about the information on hydro, because I think you said the hydros are not fully dispatched. The hydros are fully dispatched, and we cannot concentrate only on dispatching hydros alone. There are issues of grid stability. Assuming even the hydros can supply all the requirements of Nigeria, all the hydros are located in one section of the country. So you cannot, for the fact that they are cheap, say, okay, you use them to supply the whole of the country. You will be having issues because the load is not even in the place where the hydros are. The hydros are in the north, and the load is in the southwest.
Yes.
Substantial part of it. So there are issues of grid stability and the rest that you have to consider. But of importance is the fact that we have a merit order dispatch guidelines that guides dispatch to the grid. And it ensures that we have the least possible generation cost. That's the abiding guideline.
Perfect, sir.
Thank you.
Well,
I just wanted to make a comment back. I don't know
questions from
my comment.
Before we go to that question, I want to just address something Mr. Mahmoud just said about hydro mostly being in the north, which is correct, but I would say functional hydro, because there was a video which was going around which caused a lot of chat within the power sector group about some non-functional hydro plants in different parts of the country, Oyo State, Ogun State, in the east as well. Do you have from NERC a position as to why those small hydro plants are not functional? Why are they moribund? Why aren't they brought on stream?
Well, I haven't seen the video you are mentioning, but probably a number of these small hydros, I know there is an initiative of the Federal Ministry of Water Resources in which they said they will be concessioning their dams so that small hydros can be set up. Remember that all the rivers we have are virtually, owned by the federal government also? So you cannot set up any hydro in any river without the approval or without the consent of the Federal Ministry of Water Resources. So I think these are probably issues that has to do with Ministry of Water Resources. I can't remember us receiving any application for a hydro apart from the one that we have so far granted, and probably the one we are still processing for Kano State government, which is cited in, I think, Bagauda and Chigadam. We haven't received any such application from any state, I believe, in the southwest or southeast so far.
Perfect. Thank you very much, sir. Mr. Henry, let's take a question from Ayo Showa Mimo.
Are you ready? Can I just quickly acknowledge some council members, please?
Hello. Thank Mr. Ayo, can you hear me? Your network is not clear. Can you hear me? No, the network is not good. I think we need to move forward to another person.
I think Mr. Shoemimo dropped off. Chairman, have you acknowledged the council members?
Let me, yes, I would like to acknowledge presence of the immediate past president of the Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry. That is Mr. Babatunde Ruwashe. It's here with us. I would also like to acknowledge Otumba Ajayi Smith, who's another council member. And I would also like to acknowledge the immediate past chairman of the Power Sector Group, who is also a council member, Engineer Effiong Edet. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sirs. Thank you for joining us today. Mr. Henry, do you mind taking a question from Oluwaseun Adeonju?
Hello, good afternoon.
Yes, good afternoon, Mr. Seun.
Okay, good afternoon, sir. My questions to NEC, basically. The first one is in the area of billing. I fall under Ikeja Electric, and one thing I've noticed with this review cap is that virtually all unmetered customers under Ikeja Electric are now being, unmetered customers are being maxed out at the cap limit. That's like the minimum any unmetered customer gets for your area. And I believe the criteria set out for this capping, it's almost impractical for any discourse to say that it delivers the same energy to a particular area every single month, because that is what it means when I get the same bill of, let's say, 437 kilowatt per hour every single month. So there's something off with this, and we already know that there's service, the service reflected tariff that puts every area in bands. So I want to know what NEC is doing to check these billings per discos. My second question is in the area of the capping order review itself. I have in front of me the order from NEC, and I can see number 19 says that the IE proposed the following methodology for the determination of energy cap in their submission, meaning the discos were the one that proposed these things. And the number 20 says that the submission were backed by supporting documents of data and signed off by the managing director of IE. Now, number 21 says that the commission considered the submission of IE and approved the methodology in 19A. Now, basically, what did NEC do to verify this submission? Because discos basically came together and said basically on distribution transformers, this is what we are getting. Mr. Mahmoud has already said that they are working on smart metering, meaning not all DTs don't even have smart meters right now. It's what they call the feeders. So how did they come across all this? How did NEC verify this information from NEC if the end users or the CDA at the CDA level were not consulted in this review? Because this review came as a surprise and a shock to anybody. There was no pre-information. We just woke up one day and we saw a review. Then the third, in the service, for this service reflected tariff also. Now, there are several criteria for each area to be put in a particular band. And there are several criteria for discos to meet, the SLE to meet for, let's say, 8 hours, 12 hours. It's not just about the 8 hours, 12 hours, because I've had several NEC officials and commissioners say there are quite a number of criteria. It's not just about the number of hours, but this information is not readily available to the public. It's not in the public domain. We need to know as end users, the service reflected tariff is here to stay, but we need to know what the goalpost is. we need to know what the service level agreement is. It's not just about getting 8 hours. So what are the other criteria? It needs to be available for the public so that we can effectively monitor that we are not being, we are getting the service we are paying for. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I think maybe I will start by answering. Is it the second or the last question you had? How did we verify the claims of the discourse? Yes, we did. Yes, we did. There was an extensive, verification by our staff. They went around to the various discourse. Of course, it is random sampling. What did we try to do? We wanted to confirm first what really is the aggregate average consumption in most of these areas for those that have meters, because that was essentially the basis. Then for those even that don't have the meters, what is their projected average aggregate consumption? Because we found that most people stay in the same place. Let's say you live in BI. Let's say you're on Adiola Odeku Street. Okay. Most of the residences there have now turned into commercial offices.
Yes, you're right.
And most of them, on average, have similar gadgets and whatever. So if you don't have a meter there, we shouldn't expect that your consumption couldn't tally with the average consumption of all the others. That was the basis. I know it is not scientific, but it was better than allowing the disco to just come and charge you this. The only solution to this problem is metering. And meter cannot be provided in a day for all customers. It's not possible. We all know that. It is not easy. But customers also have a choice. If the metering plan of the disco, if in the metering plan of the disco, your office or your residence or your whatever is not due within the next couple of days or months, whatever, you can opt out of that and apply to be metered by a map. And you pay for that. We cannot solve this problem in a day. We have to make certain sacrifices. We all feel the same thing because we are also living in the same environment.
So can I do a follow-up on that?
Okay.
What you just said. Okay, so you've made an analogy using MD customers. The people in Adiola, Deco, and VI industries, basically they are MD. It's actually, well, it worked for them, but the bulk of the customers for discos are not MD. And now when we talk about knowing what metered customers are paid, we should also factor in the fact that they are prepaid meters. And these prepaid meters are not smart. I can say 90% of them are not smart. The representative of Eco Disco is here and can verify whether I'm right or wrong. Because I've conlog meters, all these meters that flying under the map schemes, they are not smart meters, they are RF meters. And unless you have a master RF receiver going around the street trying to get feeders, but I don't think there's a backend they can communicate with. Now, when a prepaid meter...
Mr. Shim, I'm so sorry to have to cut you off. We only have about 7 minutes left. So can we take one final question from Mr. Chuka Ora, and after which Mr. FM will give the vote of thanks. Mr. Chuka, you have exactly 1 minute, please. Henry, please put on Chuka Ebora. Mr. Chuka, please, you have about 1 minute to ask your question, and then we'll answer and go to...
Are you hearing me?
Yes, we're hearing you clearly. Mr. Chuka?
All right, thank you very much. I hear about, yes, are you here?
Yes, go on with your question, please. 30 seconds left.
Hearing me?
Yes.
Contribution are not really a question. And the contribution is addition that people say you pay for darkness and that. My concern is the provision of steady power.
Provision of steady power.
Supply. You know, I was in the villages. That's our problem. It's not about price. It's not, yeah, price is important, but that is not the main thing. Provision. Now I'm in darkness. I'm using inverter. I am using, you know, so the provision of power supply is our problem. You know, and for how long are we going to? Somebody must be reprimanded for not, you know, providing these things.
Can we ask them what area of Lagos you're in, just out of interest?
It's our problem. Yeah.
Mr.
So
Chika, can we ask what area of Lagos, just out of interest, you're in? Okay.
Yes,
Henry,
I'm sharing not.
He's sharing. Okay. Mr. Henry, please mute him. Mr. George, do you want to take that first?
Yeah, yes, yes. The concern he expressed are valid, and in fact, we have people in bands D and E. I suspect it's in bands D and E, who have actually approached us to say they are willing to be migrated to A, B, or C, provided it can be done. But then, you know, on account of the talks going on between Labour and the federal government, there's a freeze on tariff increase in bands D and E. And it's going to be there for some time. And the population there is close to 55%. So at times, you know, people want power and they want to pay for it. Then some other people are agitating, please freeze the tariffs and don't do anything about it. And we just delay these reforms. It's a function of delaying the reforms. Many people, if they see power, you can't know our network more than us. Many of our people, if they see the power, they will pay. But then we have people who are saying, no, freeze, we don't mind, just cut it across. And each time you do that, there's a shortfall. And we've said that the federal government can no longer bear that shortfall. It's falling on deaf ears. So something's got to give at some point. I hear what Mr. Chuka is saying. If it's in bands D or E, we have to wait for the time the regulator says we should wait before we can tamper with their tariffs or even migrate them. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. George. Mr. Mahmood, do you have anything to add to that before we go to our vote of thanks? In terms of power supply and steady power supply. Mr. Mahmood? Mr. Shafuddin? Okay, with that.
Okay, hello. Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I don't think we have a restriction on when to move customers. It is for the DISCO to make a submission to the commission. If you want to move your customers up, then make a submission. We consider it.
Okay, sir. Perfect. Thank you very much, sir. Now,
the commissioner, it just depends on the cluster where that customer is. Can we isolate them and come and take permission from you, or we wait?
No, you cannot isolate a customer. It is
that
not
is the point. That's the point I'm making.
Yes, no,
that's
okay.
the point I'm making.
No, it can't be. That is not possible.
That's exactly the point I'm making. Okay. We cannot do that. So we have to wait until you lift whatever on that particular cluster. That's the problem we have. And yet there are people in that cluster who are willing to pay more if they see the power. It's a dilemma, but we'll, like I said, it's a progressive thing. We'll get there.
Thank you so much, Mr. George and Mr. Mahmood. And we'll now hand you over to our former chairman of Power Sector Group, Mr. Effiong, Mr. Edit Effiong, and he will give the closing remarks. We have 3 minutes, sir. You're on mute, sir. You need to click the mute button, sir, to unmute. Henry, can you unmute him from there? Henry, can you unmute Mr. Effiong from there, please? Mr. Adoyemi, do you mind giving the closing remarks instead? We seem to be having technical issues. Everyone, thank you, Mr. Mahmoud Shafuddin from the NERC, and thank you, Mr. George Etumi. Chairman, over to you, sir.
Okay, I just want to use the opportunity to thank all those that have been part of this discussion. The representative of the chairman of NEC, Mr. Mahmoud. We thank you for your time, and also a big thank you to Mr. Etomi for giving us your time. We've really enjoyed the discussions today, and all those that have participated in this discussion one way or the other, we say thank you, and we also look forward to having more fruitful deliberations and discussions with you all in the nearest future. Thank you for your time today. Thank you all.
Thank you, everybody.
A pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
That brings us to the end of today's session. Please send in by email any questions you have, and we'll endeavor to close the process as well. Great day, everyone.